Is KSL News Radio,
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 1 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour. The president of the International Olympic Committee is coming to Utah this week. This will be the first time that Thomas Bach has visited here since the 2002 Winter Games. He'll be here touring several of Utah's Olympic venues and meeting with organizers of the 2034 Games. No secret that the current housing market is tough for first-time buyers, but also another demographic feeling the pinch. The deputy director for the Housing Authority of Salt Lake City, Brittany Dabb, says seniors on fixed incomes are being pushed out of some areas.
With how hot the market is, it's been very hard for seniors to stay in their homes or near their family.
The Housing Authority of Salt Lake City, along with some other partners, building 110 units of affordable housing for seniors near Fairmont Park. They're hoping people will be helped to stay in their communities by that. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. A man who was kidnapped as a small child 70 years ago has been reunited with family he'd long left behind. Luis Albino, now a father and grandfather, a Marine Corps veteran living on the East Coast. His niece from California found him after a long search. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 46 points on the day. The NASDAQ is up 31 right now. And our KSL weather. We'll see some sunshine through the rest of the week. Mild temperatures, that's next. KSL News Time at 1:01.
Here's a way to get breaking news updates anywhere you go.
at the store, or in a work meeting, you can get breaking news on your phone.
You can quickly read it, swipe, or click for more. It's super discreet, super fast.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Sweet chocolate reward. Sweet chocolate reward.
This is not just the sound of someone picking up a sweet treat at Walgreens. This is the sound of someone picking up a sweet treat right after receiving all their vaccines in one trip. This is the sound of treating yourself, because you protected yourself.
Stop by or schedule both your flu and COVID-19 vaccines today and grab yourself a sweet treat while you're at it. Vaccine subject to availability. State, age, and health-related restrictions may apply.
Hi, welcome to Staples.
Hi, I hear Staples can print everything for my business.
Sure can.
And the quality is guaranteed?
Absolutely.
Plus, you'll beat any price quote. Is that right?
For sure.
How about this one?
We'll beat it.
Can you print menus, signs, and flyers?
Sure can.
How about blueprints?
No problem.
What about red prints?
Not a real thing.
What if they were?
We'd print them, and they'd look amazing.
Now at Staples, print more, save more. Up to $150 off your print purchase. Ends 11/2. Exclusions apply. Visit staples.com/print for offer details and staples.com/price match for in-store price match guarantee.
Tim Jr. here from RGS Exteriors. Did you know that we offer 3 distinct styles of gutter protection? Each one meant to handle a specific leaf problem. You might not even know there are different styles of gutter protection, but there are. And if you pick the wrong one, it could be a huge waste of money. Now, the big gutter guard companies won't tell you this. They try to sell you a one-size-fits-all gutter guard. And it could be completely wrong for the amount and types of trees and leaves you have. Not RGS Exteriors. We understand which kind of leaf problem needs which kind of gutter guard. We'll do an in-depth evaluation to assess the types, locations, and numbers of trees in your yard. Based on that data, we match your home to the right gutter guard. So don't risk wasting money on the wrong gutter protection. For a free evaluation and estimate, call RGS Exteriors at 801-280-3110 or visit rgsexteriors.com. That's 801-280-3110 or rgsexteriors.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
Salt Lake City PD responding to an auto pedestrian accident, 1300 West and West Temple. And we have the final cleanup of the crash at Mountain View and 7800 South. Fall into an evening of art and music with Park City Gallery Association's Gallery Stroll this Friday evening, featuring 12 local galleries displaying their masterworks while you stroll and enjoy live music. Shop, dine, enjoy. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Mostly sunny skies with a high around 80 today, up to 90 by Wednesday, and right now we're at 73 degrees, partly cloudy skies. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com for Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Congress is on a very tight clock to prevent a government shutdown. Of course, over the weekend, a new deal was worked out and unveiled. That will be voted on at some point during the week this week. The proposal says that it will be a continuing resolution, our least favorite thing in the world, but it would fund the government for 3 whole months. Let's get past the celebration of no government shutdown and look at what we ought to be considering for how we prevent this from happening again. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, if it feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, it is. It is. Here we are once again. Now, the good news is over the weekend that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, unveiled a proposal from his playbook that would prevent a government shutdown at the end of the month. And yes, everyone should cheer for that. That's a good thing. Now, it's not quite finished. It has to get across the finish line. We'll talk about that in just a second. But we also have to look at why is it that we keep ending up in this space, and how do we prevent this from happening in another 3 months? The proposal from Speaker of the House Johnson, and quickly applauded by Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, would fund the government for all of 3 months, just as we predicted last week. Would get us just in time for the holidays in December so that we can do this all over again. And most likely what we'll end up with in December will be a big omnibus bill, which is the worst kind of legislative vehicle on the planet. And it will fund the government until the end of next year, meaning September 30th of 2025. And that bill that will be done in December will have all kinds of additional spending and pork and pet projects from all the different folks all around the country. And that's how you get $36 trillion in debt. That's the model. That's the system. And that's the way it continues to play out. Now, let's come back to the reality of this week. Again, we're 7 days away from the 30th, so things have to be done by the 30th. And there's 2 paths that Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, could go down to get this done. He obviously has some fractures in his own conference, the Republican conference, with some of those in the Freedom Caucus, those who have vowed not to ever vote for a continuing resolution because it's bad policy and it's a bad way to govern. Now, I happen to agree with them in principle on all of that. It is the worst way, and it shouldn't ever happen. Never in the history of ever should there be a threat of a government shutdown, and there never would be if Congress did their job. So I understand those who ran for office saying, I won't be part of the system. And there are many in the media and many across the political spectrum who look at that group and say, oh, they just want to shut down the government. Well, there might be some who like the theatrics of it all. But what we got to think again about is the principle that they are standing on. And the principle is we shouldn't keep doing continuous resolutions. What we should be doing is doing our job and funding the government through the appropriations process, 12 bills passed in the House, in the Senate, signed by the president. It's really simple. It's really straightforward. It's one of the few things that is outlined in the Constitution for Congress to do. And so none of us should get too upset or cast aspersions on those who saying, I won't vote for a continuing resolution. The reality is we probably all ought to wish that every member of Congress would say, no, we won't do continuing resolutions. We're going to do our job. And so there'll never be a threat that we'd have to vote on one. So that should be the goal, folks. And so you're going to hear a lot about those who are simply not going to vote for this continuing resolution because they said they wouldn't when they ran for office. And this is one of those things, as a voter, as a constituent, you always say, oh, I want someone who will stand up and speak out and speak truth to power. And we want that until there's a problem. And then suddenly we want them to acquiesce and cave in and just go with the flow. so that there's no drama. To be clear, I'm all against government shutdowns. They're not helpful. They don't move things forward, and they should never happen. And there's a really easy way to make sure they never happen. Congress has to do their job. It's really simple, super simple. So that's going to be one group that's going to get a lot of attention in the coming days. What will this group of 14 Republicans who have just simply said, we like Speaker Johnson, we think he's doing a fine job, but I committed to those who voted for me that I wouldn't vote for a continuing resolution. So that's an interesting thing to think about, something to think again about, actually, when we come to this fight that we seem to be having about every 3 or 4 months in this country. With the fake fights and the false choice of a continuing resolution or a government shutdown, those are your only two choices. Choose A or B, and that's why we end up where we are. So Speaker Johnson has got to figure out a way to get this done. And so the path seems to be he can either put the rule on the floor, which would be kind of the procedural vote to move on to it. And if he does that, traditionally these votes have been done on party lines, which is a crazy thing. But that's just the way it's been, at least for the last several decades, that if you're going to start something on the floor of the House, you have to get all your folks to get on board and get a majority to do that. Now, if these 14 Republicans say, I won't vote for that, then Speaker Johnson's going to have to get some Democrats to either cross the aisle and vote for the rule to proceed forward, or he could also do something that would suspend the rules of the House, but it takes 2/3 of the House to suspend the rules, which means he'd have to have a whole lot of Democrats come over. Now, that might make it easier in some ways, but those are the two paths, and neither one of those is easy. We've seen those play out in kind of crazy fashion over the last couple of years. Kevin McCarthy lost his job over using that process to get something done to fund the government and raise the debt ceiling. So all of these are going to continue to play out. I think they will figure out a way in the House for the Senate side of the equation there. Chuck Schumer has already said, we'll pass it. Straight up, continuing resolution, we'll pass it when it comes over. So the Senate is just sitting back now and just waiting for a little bit of drama, probably not a whole lot, but a little bit of drama to play out in the House. So that's how it is likely to go. And again, it will fund the government until about mid-December, which is what we told you they were going to do, and it is what they did. And then in December, we'll have a bigger fight because it will be an omnibus, which means it will be all kinds of spending, not just continuing things at the status quo. And I also want to make sure today, as all of this begins to take place in our nation's capital, that we also think about just how bad this is in terms of a governing model. A continuing resolution just keeps things going, the current programs at the current spending levels. The problem with that is if you have a great program, let's just say you have a great government program, but it's running out of money, you can't fund that because it hasn't been approved. Under a continuing resolution, it's not there. You can't make adjustments. If you have a horrible program and you'd like to shut it down and save that money and spend it somewhere else, an agency can't do that under a continuing resolution because it hasn't been authorized. That's the power of the purse strings that Congress always likes to talk about. Now they've got them, and a continuing resolution paralyzes everybody in that process. The same would hold true for the Department of Defense. Let's say there was a weapons system that the department was developing or working, and they suddenly decide, you know what, this is not what we need to meet the demands of the day, and so we need something completely different. They can't shut down the one to fund the other because it's not approved. Purse strings, that goes through Congress. So there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to think again about when it comes to this. Part of it is if we want people to vote on principles and then they vote on principles, will we still stand with them when it's inconvenient or when it's politically unpopular? That's actually a good test, but especially when it comes to spending. As you've heard me say many times on this program, the only way you can get in debt $36 trillion is not through conflict. We always complain about the conflict in Washington, But the collusion is the problem. When both sides decide, well, I'll spend a little more if you'll spend a little more, and we'll all spend a little more together, that's collusion. And that's how you get $36 trillion in debt. So we're watching all of that play out. We'll continue to watch it from here on Inside Sources. Stay with us. We'll continue to monitor it as it rolls through the House of Representatives this week. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. In a big election year like this,
Trump called for a grand jury to investigate.
News happens fast.
Harris said she wants an assault weapons ban.
A significant paradigm shift for the Secret Service.
On the way to work, searching for lunch, or heading home, come here to catch up. We have you covered in the car at 102.7 FM.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and if you have a drain that's clogged or backed up, after you've tried the plungers and products, the next step usually involves some kind of drain snake or cabling equipment. You see, sometimes the blockage is far enough down the line that you need special equipment that most homeowners just don't have. That's where the Drains Department at Any Hour Services can help. A drain snake can clear most blockages and get the water flowing again, and clearing blocked drains is what our Drains Department does day in and day out. So if you're a homeowner with a drain line that's clogged or backed up and you'd like one of our drain technicians to come and snake the line for you, it's only $29. Yep, you heard that right. Any Hour Services will snake any drain line with normal access for only $29. Sinks, showers, tubs, toilets, floor drains, laundry drains, even that sewer main line that connects to the city. We'll snake any line for just $29. For help with your drain issues, call Any Hour Services at 801-443-7700. You can Google Any Hour Services. You can even schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Trade in your sewing machine, any model and any brand, and get 25% off a new machine.
Yes, up to 25% off. It's happening right now at Dave's Bernina in St. George and Provo. Take advantage of 1.9% financing for 48 months on certain machines.
And all machines are discounted. Amazing bargains on previously owned machines while they last that come with warranties.
And how about this offer? Buy any Bernina presser feet or big book of embroidery, quilting, or stitching, and get the second one 50% off.
It's time to get a new Bernina machine and see the difference. Trade in your machine and save at Dave's Bernina, 691 East St. George Boulevard and 2017 North 550 West in Provo. Don't miss the sale. Dave's Bernina.
Did you know magic is here? Come see the new Bernina 990. This is the most amazing, revolutionary sewing machine in the world.
Attention commercial property managers and business owners. Say snowplow 3 times, and who shows up? Go Pave Utah. Clearing snow faster than you can say sandworms. That's GoPaveUtah.com.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma. I love you too.
Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
Boyd Matheson.
Listening to Inside Sources is a little different from just reading the headlines because we're always going to get you into that think again moment. We have experts from around the country, across the world, and right here local to home that'll help us dive in and get past just the hype, the fluff, the fake fights, and the false choice so we can get into the news to help you connect the dots and make the news make sense.
Join Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson, 1 to 3 on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, new affordable housing being developed in Sugar House for seniors. Second, a fire in Centerville caused a big power outage this morning. And third, 70 years ago, a child from California was kidnapped, taken to the East Coast, raised as a child of another family. Luis Albino has now been reunited with the relatives who were looking for him. 75 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Well, in today's politically charged environment, how significant are the roles of celebrities? As we approach the 2024 presidential election, in particular, the endorsements of celebrities and public figures are drawing all kinds of attentions from fans, from critics. That's all contributing to the ongoing debate about the responsibility and influence of those who are in the public eye. And while some say that public figures should be using their voice to share their thoughts, others argue that these celebrity roles are to solely encourage people to vote. Not how to vote, but just to vote. So where do you fall when it comes to the argument? What does that look like? Someone that always helps us clarify our thinking is Kelsey Dallas, Assistant Managing Editor for the Deseret News. And Kelsey, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, as always.
Hey, this is kind of a fun one. It's amazing the reactions and the reactions to the reactions, as we've had a lot of high-profile individuals weigh in, particularly on presidential politics. But give us the straight shot. Do celebrity endorsements, in the end, are they really moving the needle at all when it comes to actual votes cast?
They don't seem to, at least in the case of most celebrities. And when I say most celebrities, that includes really high-profile celebrities like Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Kim Kardashian. There was research done in May, so that was before President Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 race. But basically it found that almost all the celebrities that people were surveyed on were swaying voters less than 10%, and in many cases less than 5% of voters said that they would be influenced by an endorsement.
Yeah, and so as you look at that now, granted, it will be a very close election, so even a small nudge one way or the other might be a difference maker in some of those battleground kinds of states. But what is it, as you've looked at this, Kelsey, what is it that you've seen? Again, is this more just high value or another form of entertainment on social media, or where is this actually leading us?
I think it's leading us to a lot of frustration. As you noted, this at the very least is something that people like to argue about. And as I've thought about it, I think the conclusion I've drawn is that a lot of folks who are really invested in election season are frustrated at the idea that someone would cast their ballot based on something as trivial as seeing a tweet or Instagram post about it. Like, why wouldn't you try to be educated, read some news coverage, watch the debate? And so I think there's this frustration about celebrities wading into this and influencing even a small amount of folks with a simple couple of sentences on social media.
Yeah, and I do think it's interesting, too, that, as you said, just the how people get their hackles up so big so fast. And, you know, should we protest somebody's concert? Should we not go to somebody's football game? Or should I get rid of somebody's football jersey that I wear around because they're telling me to vote for a candidate that I don't like? I think all of that gets really interesting. But it does lead, as you were alluding to how we actually ought to be approaching making decisions about those we cast our ballot for.
Well, what I'm curious about is how people would respond if a celebrity went beyond saying, hey, I support this person, here's a couple of basic reasons, and really engaged and said, these are the specific issues that I care about. Here's why I like this person's take on those issues. Here's why I don't like the other person's, and almost convened a public forum in a sense. That's not the role we're used to a celebrity playing, but I assume that would be taken a little better, because that would be not only encouraging people to vote, but informing them about the state of the race and some of the issues involved. But if I had to guess, I think that type of interference in the election, influence on the election would make plenty of people angry as well, because we don't agree on how we each see Harris and Trump's take on the issues. Like, there is no one accepted definition of what each of them mean on abortion or what each of them mean on religious freedom. And so I don't think we're happy for anyone who's not seen as an expert to try to wade into it and speak on the issues.
Yeah, and that's such a great thing, I think, to be moving towards is, you know, if you did have them weigh in more specifically, not just vote for this person, vote for that person, but I'm voting for this person, and here's why. And you lay out 3 or 4 things. And that's where it gets really interesting for companies, for brands, and for celebrities. That if they go too far down that hole, then suddenly they're offending half of their customers or half of their audience. And then suddenly the dynamics start to shift. And so it seems to me that there's a lot of those celebrities who like to play the high-level game and kind of be in the room where it's happening, but they don't necessarily want to do the hard work and heavy lifting of staking a claim on a particular principle or policy.
Right now, celebrities are getting pushback for not making endorsements just as much as those who have made endorsements are facing pushback for what they've said or for getting too political. And so it really is a no-win situation for a lot of folks right now. That's why it's notable that Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes did get so much love for sort of staying above the fighting over Taylor Swift's endorsement and talking about wanting to just encourage people to vote. It was interesting that he sort of floated above all the drama that's taking place. But I think celebrities, if I could give them advice, it's that you basically are going to anger a certain amount of people no matter what you say and do. And so you just would want to be thoughtful and say, what is the mark I want to leave on this election season, and go from there.
Yeah, and as you look at that from your unique perch, Kelsey, what do you think we ought to be thinking about? There's always the rush that, this is going to be the year where the youth vote comes out, makes the difference, really takes charge of things as the older folks age out or are no longer voting because they're passing away. Is this going to be an election where there will be that kind of sea change, or is this going to be one more time where there's a lot of anticipation, but maybe not a lot of realization when it comes to younger voters?
I worry that I am a little too jaded about this. I've done reporting on young religious voters and young voters who are interested in religion but not engaged in a religious community. And basically everything I've heard back was these folks just aren't joiners, and that includes not joining the line on election day to vote. They're just sort of not making plans to do it. And I think that's an interesting note when we talk about Taylor Swift driving more than 300,000 people to vote.org to learn about voting. Is registering to vote is only the first step, and it's quite an easy step compared to figuring out where your polling place is, going there, waiting in the line if there is a line, bringing the right identification. And so I certainly hope that there is interest and engagement in this election, but I'm skeptical that there'll be a notable difference with younger people just because younger people over time have sort of failed to get engaged.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial part of that. It is pretty easy to register to vote. Showing up to vote is another matter. Even in a state like Utah that's going to mail you a ballot if you register to vote, you still have to fill it out, and then you have to go drop it off somewhere. And while as easy as that is, it seems that for some of those younger voters, it never quite hits the mark. Anything else you're watching as this all plays out, Kelsey, as we march our way 43 days to the election?
I was thinking about this conversation about celebrity endorsements in light of the work that I've done on endorsements from faith leaders. So pastors are not meant to endorse a candidate. They can talk generally about the issues, but technically it violates IRS rules if a church leader were to full-throatedly throw their support behind a particular candidate. And so I've written about that for quite a while. And what I began to reckon with thinking about celebrities is, would this be basically the same situation if pastors endorse candidates, that they would get a lot of anger and frustration, but maybe not actually influence the outcome very much, that it would just be another thing to argue about or feel uncomfortable with, or a church really having to struggle through that moment. But at the end of the day, people are going to base their decision around things that maybe aren't totally faith-based, like the economy or some other issue that's near and dear to their heart.
Yeah, so important. And I think that's another crucial conversation. It seems that we have, with celebrities included in all of this, we have so deified our politics and our politicians and our celebrities, and we've politicized our faith spaces in a lot of ways. And we got to get that balance right. And then I think we'll both have the right respect for the right folks, and we'll vote for the right reasons in the right ways, and keep communities connected in that whole process. Kelsey Dallas, Assistant Managing Editor for the Deseret News. Great insight as always. Kelsey, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, that's Kelsey Dallas. Always love her thinking and some great perspective there. Not only in terms of the celebrity endorsements, I thought also the faith-based endorsements are also a really interesting thing to consider. And will it make a difference? Probably not. Maybe got a few more people to register, but registering is one thing. Actually voting is quite another. We'll be right back.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Power has been restored to more than 8,000 Rocky Mountain Power customers after a fire broke out at a substation in Centerville. Firefighters say the power company was able to handle it on their own. South Davis Metro Fire Battalion Chief Mike Hansen says they won't even think about going into a substation unless the power company tells them it's safe.
Not knowing what we're getting into. So last thing you want to be doing is spraying a bunch of water and stuff, inside a electrically charged area.
Hansen says the large plume of black smoke that people saw over Bountiful this morning was from refineries in the area having to burn out whatever product they couldn't process before the power went out. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. A federal judge in Florida says the man suspected in this month's apparent assassination attempt on Donald Trump will remain in jail. The magistrate judge ultimately deciding that Ryan Routh should be denied bail. Prosecutors offered new evidence, including a handwritten note written months ago in which Routh is purported to have said this was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up on the day, 50 points right now. The NASDAQ is up 30. And our KSL weather. We've got mostly sunny skies through the rest of the week, and that's next. KSL News Time, 1:31.
News doesn't just mean information or dates.
It's the story of our local history being told in real time.
Be a part of the story. This is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
We hope to be a part of your story. We have you covered on KSL News Radio.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy two. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
At the UPS Store, we understand the importance of a first impression. That's why we're here to help you put your best foot forward and be unstoppable with our printing services. With high-quality paper stock options, banners, business cards, menus, and more, we make sure your small business stands out and your message reaches the masses. After all, we're the one-stop Prints That Pop store. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Be unstoppable. Come into your local store today and get your print on.
When it comes to our homes, stains in your carpet can be really frustrating. It can be easy to think you need harsh chemicals or detergents to get them out, but these always leave behind soapy residue, which ends up attracting more dirt to the area. That's why you should trust Zero-Res to get out tough stains and regularly clean your surfaces. Zero-Res uses ZR water to deeply clean carpets without any icky residue. Right now, mention KSL and get 3 rooms of carpet cleaning for just $109. Plus 20% off air duct cleaning. Book now at zerores.com.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
If it's a door-to-door salesman, buyer beware. Hi, this is Jason.
And Kathy of Window World.
Answer that door and prepare for some serious baloney.
You know, overpriced, but on sale today.
Big special.
Manager's discount.
Model home in the neighborhood.
Remember, the sale ends today.
Hey, it's all baloney.
Window World's different.
Check windowworldutah.com.
Or call 801-281-8111.
Window World. Simply the best for less.
And as Doug always said, that's no baloney.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
Salt Lake City PD wrapping up an accident, 2300 North, 1500 West, and we also have the clearing of the auto pedestrian accident downtown at West Temple and 1300 West. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Mostly sunny skies with a high around 80 today, up to 90 by Wednesday. Right now, we're looking at 76 degrees under partly cloudy skies. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The free speech debate continues around the world as differing definitions clash and forces us to think again about what we believe when it comes to free speech. We've seen this play out in real time between the company X, of course formerly known as Twitter, and the nation of Brazil. Tech companies today are global, but different countries have different standards towards speech. What conflicts are rising up, and what role does America play on the world stage when it comes to our First Amendment rights? J.D. Tuccilli, of course, is someone we always turn to, contributing editor at Reason.com, has a great piece on writers and academics and their response to Brazil's censorship in an open letter. J.D., welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, give us the lowdown here. We've been tracking this, but for our listeners who maybe haven't been following as closely what's going on in Brazil when it comes to free speech, give us the lay of the land.
Sure enough. I mean, the backstory on this is that Brazil had an election a few years ago, and a left-wing government replaced a right-wing government. The Twitter platform and a lot of other social media platforms, Twitter is now known as X, were put under scrutiny by the new government. And they were concerned that supporters of the previous regime were getting platforms, were being able to spread the message and criticize the government. So the government, and in particular Brazil's Supreme Court, which plays a much more proactive and kind of interventionist role in the country's politics than does the U.S. Supreme Court in American politics, started scrutinizing a couple of platforms, Telegram first, but X in particular, and saying that various political critics of the government, a lot of people, had to be stripped of their accounts, had to be driven offline, things they say had to be censored. X complied in a couple of cases and then reinstated all the accounts, saying that the Brazilian government was overstepping its authority, it was censoring, and it was violating the parameters of not only a free society, but also Brazil's own constitution. Brazil's Supreme Court has now threatened X with massive fines and banned the platform from the country. People in Brazil are bypassing the ban by using virtual private networks to get around, the various attempts by the government to stop them from connecting to X, and they're threatened with high fines, daily fines for doing so. And the saga last I heard was that Twitter rejiggered its servers so that they couldn't be so effectively blocked, and they were available to most Brazilians once again. So it's been this ongoing battle between a democratic but authoritarian democratic government that tries to censor political critics, and X, which, while not always consistent in support for free speech, is much better than the Brazilian government.
Yeah, and so that leads us to a really interesting question in terms of how this impacts us here at home, and what is the right role for the United States of America in these kinds of conversations as a global leader of free speech, freedom of the press, and so on. What does that look like? What does that or what should that sound like?
Well, I would hope that people and platforms and companies would do their best to uphold respect for people's rights wherever they work. And if things get too bad in the country, they might pull out and make the services available on the Internet, no matter what the country wants, which is sort of what X is doing now. It's a hard thing. I mean, American companies do business in authoritarian countries around the world all the time, and there are always certain moral compromises involved. But this is about fundamental free speech involving a social media platform that is all about speech. And this kind of strikes to the core of what X and other social media platforms do. So I think that X is making the right choice here in challenging the Brazilian government and kind of defying its orders.
Now, you noted in your piece at Reason.com that you had a number of writers and academics that were applauding Brazil's censorship, and kind of walk us through that. It's one of those, I think it's an old Star Wars reference that, liberty dies to thunderous applause, and it seems to me we may be entering the applause phase in a lot of this.
Yeah, this is really disturbing. It's a open letter written in Portuguese signed by 40 international thinkers from countries from France, the UK, Canada, the US. applauding the Brazilian government and supporting it and saying that it shouldn't back down in its fight with X because it was fighting for digital sovereignty against these foreign big tech corporations that were threatening the power of governments to regulate their own societies and their own chunks of the internet. And it was signed by some pretty major names. I mean, names that some people at least would recognize. The one that surprised me the most was Cory Doctorow, who is known as for his association with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He's a civil libertarian, or at least that's his reputation. And he's written a number of anti-authoritarian novels, including one, Homeland, that won a Prometheus Award. From the Libertarian Futurist Society for being so anti-authoritarian, yet he signed on to this letter applauding an authoritarian government's censorship efforts over social media, and it's kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah. You also noted in your piece that Brazil's not the only place where these kind of battles are taking up, and as you said, there's an interesting compare and contrast. You have the power of the big tech companies and these social media platforms. You also have authoritarianism definitely on the rise in different places around the world. How are you seeing this play out, and what should we all be concerned about as it relates to this component of free speech?
Yeah, this is really disturbing. There's a group it's called the Future of Free Speech. It's based out of Vanderbilt University, and they've been warning that the entire world has been in a free speech recession now for a number of years. They put out a report at the end of 2023 that tracked declining respect for and protection for free speech across 22 liberal democracies. It's not just talking about Russia. They're not just talking about China, and they're not even just talking about Brazil. They're talking about the United States, the UK, Canada, France, Germany, South Korea, Japan. I mean, countries that are supposed to be developed, established liberal democracies that respect, to a significant extent, the liberties of their citizens. And what they're saying is that free speech protection and respect for it is in decline around the world, including in nominally free countries. And I think we see that when we have prominent economists like Thomas Piketty and Gabriel Zucman and Darren Acemoglu, but also even nominal civil libertarians like Cory Doctorow signing a letter praising a government for being authoritarian and for waging a war to crack down on free speech.
And as we watch this play out all around the world, what's the implication, the impact it's going to have for us in terms of our own free speech right here at home?
You know, this is really dangerous because a lot of the platforms that are being targeted are international in scope. And it's actually very expensive and very hard for them to establish different rules for different countries. So we may end up living in the U.S. Bound by rules on the social media we use, established by the lowest common denominator. That means by the most authoritarian country served by some of these services. In particular, the European Union, because it is so big, has so many people in it, and is also so restrictive when it comes to speech, may be setting the rules that Americans who think they're protected by the First Amendment have to abide by.
Wow, fascinating stuff, and an important conversation that we've got to make sure we keep an eye on, not only in what's happening in Brazil and other places around the world, but ultimately how that trickles down and trickles back to what we're doing right here at home. As always, J.D. Tuccilli gets us thinking a little bit differently about what we think we know, and he is the contributing editor at Reason.com. You can check out his piece, Writers and Academics Applaud Brazil's Censorship in an Open Letter. You can find that at Reason.com. And as always, J.D., thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Again, that's J.D. Tuccilli joining us from Reason.com. And this one is very troubling to me. And sometimes we look at a headline like that and we think, okay, well, that's just Brazil. They're just having some struggles with that. I get it. I can understand why they want to push back against a big company like X. But then you got to look at the regime that's in power, that's become increasingly authoritarian, that suddenly wants to control and restrict the ability of those who are against it or oppose it from doing what they want to do, to make their case, talk directly to the voters and the people of Brazil. And so they start to put restrictions on who can have certain social media accounts, who can talk about certain things on the internet. And that kind of control, authoritarian control, it starts in little dribs and drabs, but it doesn't take much to turn into some big momentum that ultimately does not end well. Because as we know and as we fight for in this country, the First Amendment is the First Amendment. It doesn't belong to the government, doesn't belong to the president, belongs to we the people. And maintaining those rights and that ability to speak up and to speak out, even when it's not popular, or especially when it's unpopular, is part of our free society and crucial for freedom to continue as we move into the future. All right, we'll go ahead and step aside for a quick break. When we come back, more Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Don't miss Utah Symphony's annual Celebración Sinfónica Festival at Marisa Bravanel Hall. September 27th and 28th, experience a lively concert celebrating Latin American and Spanish cultures. And on Saturday the 28th from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., stop by the plaza to find artisan crafts, grab a bite from local food vendors, watch talented dancers perform, and more. Tickets start at just $10. Visit utahsymphony.org/festival for details.
We're in St. George, and Jenny found a home online that she really loved.
And then we went through it with our realtor. He started pointing out things that were going to just lead us to a money pit.
We would have been in this house $50,000 or more in repairs.
With the help of our realtor, we were able to find a brand new home for $100,000 less than what we would have been paying for one that was 12 years older. We thought we were going to save money not using a realtor, but in the end, our realtor actually saved us over $150,000.
Let an experienced realtor guide you. Go to myrealtorstory.com.
KSL Broadcast Group contests are open to participants 13 years of age and older that are residents of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada, unless otherwise specified. Employees or agents of the station, Bonneville International Corporation, or other area radio stations, or any entity associated with the contest may not enter. Persons who have won in the last 90 days from a station contest or event are not eligible. Full general contest rules are available at kslnewsradio.com.
In 2024, dating is a disaster. We've been ghosted, breadcrumbed, stuck in situationships. Hi, I'm Debbie. I'm Caitlin. Welcome to our new podcast, Dating at Her Age. Dating has been so dicey for us, so we asked KSL, can we launch an all-new podcast about it?
People use these dating apps. You're not really dating when you're on the dating app.
Dating at Her Age, brought to you by Mountain Home Services. A new episode drops every Thursday on kslnewsradio.com.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
Managing today's uncertainty can be overwhelming. We crave security, and it's uncomfortable when we sense a lack of control over our lives. Develop a routine for a more balanced lifestyle with healthy habits and fun. Focus on what you can control, even if it's little things, like a before-bedtime ritual.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Dave and Dujanovic.
What our listeners need to know is what's going on behind the scenes. We hold weekly meetings on how to do our jobs as talk show hosts, as journalists, better than we did them yesterday.
There's some very conservative voices. There's some very liberal voices. But there is space for both. And we're not at each other's throats. We're not yelling at each other. We're having a discussion.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, no bail for the man suspected of plotting an assassination attempt against former President Trump. Second, power's been restored to a large area of Centerville after an outage this morning. Third, the state of California telling a major plastics manufacturer to get real about recycling. 76 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
I want to go back to a conversation I had with Dr. Paul Carisse from Arizona State University about the different civic virtues that can provide a crucial framework for our understanding the foundation of our political system. This is a crucial one. That's why I want to go back. I think it's important for us on a Monday as we kind of set the stage for the week and as we watch a lot of the drama and things play out as we march towards the election day. And so this conversation with Dr. Paul Carisse is an interesting one to me because he talked about something called reflective patriotism. I think it's a powerful principle that we don't talk nearly enough about. So let's jump into my conversation with Dr. Paul Carisse. Dr. Carisse, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Boyd. Thank you for your time.
It is great to have you here in the state, and I love your approach to all of this in terms of these civic virtues. We often talk about those on this program, that we got to get back to that the Constitution is not a something that gets in the way or divides us. It actually is a unifying document. And I want to get to something that you have really focused on that I think is so powerful that I don't think we talk enough about, and that is this idea of reflective patriotism. Explain that for us.
Thank you. Well, the distinctive American constitutional civic culture, and you're right, we don't think about this very much, requires a capacity to argue, disagree, state your point of view, but hear another point of view. That's in the very fabric and structure of our forms of government and forms of politics, from the local level, towns and cities, up to the state level, up to the federal government. This is how our constitutions and charters are designed. And we just don't think about the education needed to operate in that complicated way, that free people are always going to disagree with each other. That's baked into the system. And then we've structured the system to require more argument so that we the final product of a law or a policy or a regulation, whatever, is a little less dumb than it might have been otherwise, and a little bit better, more fair, more just than it might have been. And then to have that happening day in and day out. So that's that phrase that I've used, reflective patriotism, comes from a French observer coming to America in the 1830s, Alexis de Tocqueville, his great work, Democracy in America. And he says this is a new kind of patriotism in the new world that these Americans have. It has a rational element to it, of argument and independent thinking, and you want to disagree with the government, you want to disagree with your fellow citizens, because America is not based on some mythic history or blood or soil, the old world basis for patriotism. There is a love that Americans have for America, but there's also this idea we have natural rights of individuals. We have written founding documents. And so the rational part is, what do those founding documents and principles mean? What's the government doing? What should I be doing? And all of that rational argument, reflection, and robust speech is there. He's saying it's working very well in the 1830s. But of course, the Civil War is ahead on the horizon, and it's not always been a happy story. And now the challenge of the past really 50 years is that we've neglected at the higher education level and in the K-12 schools the serious time and attention all of this takes, because it doesn't happen naturally.
That reflective patriotism does not get just passed along in the bloodstream or part of the water system. It's something that you have to learn and experience. And I was reading something this morning, really interesting. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who we got to have on this program just before he passed, I was reading some of his work, and he talked about America as being a covenant society, where Great Britain was more of a tradition society. And he actually talked about it in a unique way. He said in Great Britain, they build all these monuments and statues, but they just put the date or the name of the person on there or when they lived. Whereas in America, there's usually a compelling quote or a story or something to be told. And it's in that story. And I think that's part of what you're saying in terms of our education, is that we have to reconnect to the stories that really drive those principles that underline everything that we're trying to do in this grand experiment.
Wonderful. Lord Sachs was a wonderful resource, and we had him at Arizona State University before he passed as well. Well, it is the general theme in our conversation is the multiple good principles involved in a free society, a self-governing democratic republic. There's more than one good principle involved, and how do you strike balances? So what Lord Sachs is suggesting is that some idea of history and of exemplary models from the past and great moments from your past, that's got to be part of the civic culture and the civic education for citizens and aspiring citizens of a free society. But of course, there's another principle, which is that we want to argue and disagree and deal with the problems of the moment, right? And how do you strike the balance between those two? And I think that's what he's seeing in America, that America has that. That the fact that there has to be a quotation or a story or narrative along with some historical monument is this reflective patriotism. That there is a rational element. But again, as you said, it's not in the bloodstream. It doesn't happen in any kind of natural way, even in families, right? Families are a crucial element of this. This was a question raised after my lecture this morning at Brigham Young University with the Wheatley Institute. What about families? Crucial element. Tocqueville and the American founders as well talk about the role of family and of civil society. But there also need to be formal elements in schools and other institutions that we look to provide education in other ways. Well, this topic, these questions of civic and historical knowledge as the basis for citizens, those educational institutions also need to make space for this.
Yeah, and so how do we go about that? Both the informal education in terms of teaching and infusing those civic virtues, as well as outside of the formal education settings. How do we get to that where we're really starting to model? I always go back to the letter that George Washington sent with the Constitution to the Congress, talking about the real, we always call it the secret sauce of Philadelphia, that there was this friendship, this amity, deference, and concession. So, friendship, dignity, and respect across our differences and being willing to compromise. But how do we do that both in the formal settings better, and then what do we need to do outside of those formal educational settings to make sure we do infuse this into the future generation?
It was wonderful that you know of that letter and you talked about it with your audience. The word you mentioned earlier, the phrase you mentioned earlier in your introduction, civic virtues, which is not a kind of phrase that comes out of our schools of education or our teachers' colleges, or in my discipline, political science, in a university college, or even history. And so it's not very much of a presence in K-12 schools. But I was involved in a report released in 2021 that was a national consensus effort to look at K-12 civics and history education. And was funded by the U.S. Department of Education. And I was the one conservative among the 7 co-authors who agreed to come together to write this report. So it was itself a national consensus effort to at least have one conservative at the table writing in the lead, and then there were other conservatives involved. But I persuaded my friends there, my civic friends, to use the phrase civic virtues.
Yeah.
That it wasn't good enough to talk about what education schools talk about, skills and dispositions. It's a little too clinical.
Yeah.
This is hard. You're the governor here of the great state of Utah, right? Talks about this is hard to have civil discourse and civil disagreement with people of the opposite party, even people within your own party, or of no party, right? Of opposing views, different philosophies, different religious foundations for their views. It's hard work. And so that word virtue is calling for excellence. And it's hard work to get to excellence. We know that in every dimension of life that we need excellence. So to teach about civic virtues in formal schooling, K through 12, and then college and university, and then if you're doing it in the college and university, you now have a virtuous loop going back to the K-12 schools, right? Because all the teachers and the principals and even the school board members, they all come from college and university, right? So you're teaching it formally, and then it's in the civic culture that you're talking about models of excellence. Oh, we look up to, Boyd, you and I are the age, we remember Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, right? Conservative president, revolutionary, shocking that this conservative Republican gets elected president, 1980. And then Tip O'Neill, that's a classic Democrat, liberal, progressive Democrat, but they're civic friends with each other across party lines, even while they're going at each other, hammer and talk about their policy disagreements, right? There's a story that when Ronald Reagan was shot, in 1981, was it? Tip O'Neill comes to the to the hospital room and kneels at Reagan's bedside and prays, right?
Wow.
And these guys are going at it hammer and tong in public about how wrong the other one is, about this policy question and this taxation, right? So to say we are still civic friends, that is a civic virtue they have. We are civic friends across these deep philosophical, partisan policy differences that we have. So and here you're in good shape in Utah compared to some other states and other places to have both the Wheatley Institute at Brigham Young, at Utah Valley University, the Center for Constitutional Studies there, and all the work they're doing on civic education, the new master's degree that they have. So, and then they've got a public voice like you here in Utah talking about these questions.
Well, we think it's the crucial conversation we have to get to, and we hope we can export that across the country as well. Dr. Paul Carisse, professor in the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University, gave a lecture down at BYU at the Wheatley Institute this morning, and this is the crucial conversation. Dr. Carisse, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to having you back and staying with the conversation just a little bit longer. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much. I hope we can talk again.
That's my conversation, and an important one with Dr. Paul Carisse from Arizona State University. And that wraps it up for hour number 1 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We're going to step aside for some top-of-the-hour news, but don't go anywhere. We got a big hour number 2 coming at you right after the break. We'll get into the experiment of America, and it's not the one you think. We'll talk about that coming up next. Stick around.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. Salt Lake Bees on their way to daybreak. Now, the future of Smith's Ballpark still unclear. KSL News Radio's Alexandria Bonilla has more.
Plans for the park were supposed to be solidified by fall 2024. Now that's being pushed out to 2026. Ballpark Community Council Chair Amy Hawkins tells David Dujanovic they're concerned over the push, and they would love to see some kind of intermediate use in the meantime, including the Utes looking at using the stadium for their 2025 season.
It could take years to come up with a long-term use plan for the stadium. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. A federal judge in Florida says the man suspected in this month's apparent assassination attempt against former President Trump will remain in jail. The magistrate judge ultimately deciding that Ryan Routh should be denied bail. The state of California is suing ExxonMobil, a major player in plastics. It says the company has for many years touted recycling, even though it knew most plastics are not being recycled. The state says most of the plastic we put in our blue bins can't or won't be recycled. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average is up on the day now 61 points. The NASDAQ is up 25. And our KSL weather. Sunshine through the rest of the week and getting a little warmer. That's next. KSL News Time 2:01.
You know what's great about KSL's traffic coverage? Trained traffic reporters and real listeners.
Trading information and making the commute safer and faster for everyone.
Every 10 minutes on the 9s, we have you covered on KSL News Radio.
Jeff Kaplan. I'm energized by breaking news. First of all, because it's right now, and second of all, because in many cases the audience needs to know. There's no more important service that we can provide, and I find it critically important to get more details to the audience as quickly as possible. There's nothing more energizing than that for me. Not at all. The most important thing we do is breaking news. I am gratified that so many people listen to me every afternoon on KSL, but what they don't know is that there are so many people behind the scenes making it happen, checking on the traffic, answering the phones, making the calls, talking to the newsmakers. They're out in the street, into the field to get the raw information, and then putting it all together so that I can sit in front of a microphone and be a source of information every afternoon. But there are so many people who make it happen. That's what you don't know.
Ride Home with Jeff Kaplan, weekdays 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Emergency crews are responding to a multiple vehicle crash in Riverton, and it does look like they are blocking a left lane, a left and center lane of travel. This is southbound Bangor Highway at 134th South. The 8th annual My Gluten Free World Expo is being held September 27th and 28th at the Mountain America Expo Center in Sandy. See over 100 vendors showcasing the best of gluten-free. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Mostly sunny with a high today around 80, up to 90 by Wednesday. And right now we're at 77 degrees with mostly cloudy skies. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
We often talk about America as an experiment in democracy. But what if the more important experiment that we're involved in here in America is actually something different? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
So we're going to invite you on a Monday to think again about this grand experiment that we talk about in America. And usually when we talk about America as a grand experiment, we're talking about freedom and democracy, a constitutional republic. But I want you to think again about that today and think about it as a grand experiment in the power of friendship. So if you go back, Alexis de Tocqueville, we talked about this in our last segment in the introduction to democracy in America, noted that the power of the American experience was to be found in the way the citizens regularly, powerfully, and freely came together. They came together to help friends and neighbors and those in need. And such free association, de Tocqueville posited, could be the greatest power and the greatest force for good to lift, ennoble, and enlighten citizens of every economic class, not through coercion of government, but through cooperation and goodwill. The American experience has always been an experiment in the inherent goodness of people and the power of friendship. Now, my family spent many hours, probably way too many hours, watching the TV series The West Wing. It was the perfect combination of fast-paced, sophisticated dialogue merged with principles and some good politics to create a good form of entertainment. But years later, as a real-life chief of staff in the United States Senate, I would realize that the West Wing moments in Washington were actually pretty few and far between. But they do happen. They do happen. Interestingly, most of those moments were connected not to politics, but to people. Now, back to the West Wing. One of the most powerful scenes in Aaron Sorkin's West Wing occurred in an episode when the president's chief of staff, Leo McGarry, a recovering alcoholic, reached out to a struggling staffer in Josh Lyman. So when Lyman asked the often very surly Leo McGarry why he had waited hours for him to come out of a counseling session, Leo McGarry responded with a story. It's one of my favorite. It goes like this. He says, this guy was walking down a street and he falls in a hole. The walls are so steep he can't get out. A doctor passes by and the guy shouts up, hey, you, can you help me out? The doctor writes a prescription, throws it down the hole, and moves on. Then a priest comes along and the guy shouts up, Father, I'm down here in the hole. I can't get out. Can you help me? The priest writes out a prayer, throws it down into the hole, and moves on. Finally, a friend walks by. Hey, Joe, it's me. Can you help me out? And the friend jumps in the hole. The guy says, are you stupid? Now we're both down here. The friend says, yeah, but I've been down here before, and I know the way out. Now, I don't know about you, but I have routinely been blessed by those kinds of friends. People who have experienced hard things, but were willing to jump into whatever hole I had fallen into or dug my way into. Often these hole jumpers have appeared in the form of friends I'd actually never even met. William Penn is purported to have said, a true friend advises justly, assists readily, adventures boldly, takes all patiently, defends courageously, and continues a friend unchangeably. I love that. There's a lot of lessons in there. We could unpack those for hours. I'm going to read that again just because I think it's such an important quote. So again, this was purported to be written by William Penn, that a true friend advises justly, assists readily, adventures boldly, takes all patiently, defends courageously, and continues a friend unchangeably. Now, some of the people that come into our lives, they come in for a brief season. Some people come into our lives for a particular reason. Some we just kind of brush past, and some come in and stay around for a while or an entire lifetime. But the important thing to recognize in any relationship is that you don't have to worry about the future, because the people you meet, whether they're a lifelong friend, a casual acquaintance, a one-time connection, they all can have a profound impact on who you are, where you're going, and ultimately what you become. There are some lines from a favorite piece from Larry Chenges that powerfully capture, I think, the essence of real friendship, and something that I think we need more of in our nation these days. It goes like this. It says, "Every moment we're together, I'm learning something, and that knowledge becomes a permanent part of me. Though my feelings will be different a year from now or 10 years from now, part of the difference in my life is you. Because of you, I'm a different person, and the person I will grow to become, with or without you by my side, will have gotten there, partly because of you. If you weren't in my life right now, I could not be who I am right now, nor would I be growing in exactly the same way. Much of what I grow toward and change within myself has to do with what I respond to in you and what I learn from you. Also, what I understand about myself and what I learn about my feelings comes through the dynamics of our connection. So, I don't worry about our future together, since we've already touched each other on and affected each other's lives on so many levels that we can never totally be removed from each other's thoughts. A part of me will always be you, and a part of you will always be me. That much is certain, no matter what else happens." I think as we look at that in relationship to people that we work with, people that live near us in our community and neighborhood, relationships with friends, all of those have tremendous power and opportunity. I've shared those lines and those sentiments with individuals, with teams, with organizations I've led, places that I've been and left. I'm always thankful for those who live up to that title of true friend. And I would just add that for me, friends in high places has nothing to do with power or position. To me, friends in high places are those who have either transcended this earthly existence, or those I've only met through their works or through their words, or through those who've joined me mentally or physically for a stroll in the low-lying and lonely road of the difficult days. And finding those kind of people in your life matter. But everybody can be a friend. I always love President George Albert Smith, 8th President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was that kind of friend to everybody. It was said of him that he lacked the prowess of an athlete, that he was too homely to win popular favor, and that his weak eyes prevented him from becoming a scholar. But he could excel in human kindness. So he made love and kindness his specialty. And part of his own personal creed was, "I would be a friend to the friendless and find joy in ministering to the needs of the poor. I would not knowingly wound the feelings of any, not even one who may have wronged me, but would seek to do him good and to make him my friend." We need more of that kind of focus. And so as we begin our week this week, I think we should think again about what we think we know about this grand experiment in America. Not our grand experiment of democracy, but our grand experiment of friendship and what it means. We had Reverend Teresa Deer on this program a few weeks ago, and she said something that has really stuck with me since then. She said, you have to make friends before you need friends. And that is true of individuals, that is true of organizations, and that's true of countries. You have to make friends before you need friends. Because the moment you need a friend, if you haven't made a friend, you don't have a friend. And then you're on your own. And for what I've seen and what I've experienced, especially in our nation's capital, those individuals who are willing to do the hard work and the heavy lifting of cultivating relationships, not transactions, relationships. When you start playing in that sphere, that's where real friendship, authentic friendship, actually begins. And to me, that's the important piece of the puzzle as we look at this grand experiment in America, not just of democracy and freedom, but America is truly a grand experiment in the power of friendship. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Key stories are changing by the day.
The air was unhealthy up and down the state.
It's going to cost a lot more to keep the homeless warm this winter.
Stories that affect family and community.
The whole state has absenteeism rates that are higher than average.
An appeal has already been filed to reinstate Amendment D.
When you're in the car, KSL has updated info on where stories are going and what's changed. Get important breaking news each time you jump in the car.
We have you covered
on KSL News Radio.
Hi, I'm Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sac Lake City with Advanced Window Products.
And I'm Jake, the other guy. Are your windows old and inefficient and driving up your energy bills?
It's time for an upgrade. Our energy-efficient windows not only look great, but also help you save on your utility bills.
And right now, we're offering an incredible deal. $2,500 off when you purchase 10 windows or more.
That's right, $2,500 in savings to make your home more comfortable and energy efficient.
Plus, we offer a lifetime warranty on all our windows, so you can have peace of mind.
Don't wait. Call us today at 801-850-9100 or visit us at advancedwindows.com to schedule your free estimate. We also offer payment plans as low as $150 a month.
From our factory to your installation in 8 weeks or less. Call us today at 801-850-9100 or visit us at advancedwindows.com to schedule your free estimate.
Advanced Window Products, Utah's window experts.
My wife and I always loved doing everything together. Jiu-jitsu, kayaking, and intimacy was always on point. It was around my early 30s when I noticed a downward trend. Watching a lot of TV, putting on weight, and just full of self-doubt. I had tried another men's clinic with disappointing results. It's the personalized treatment I receive at Revive Men's Health that has been the complete game changer for me. I've got my energy and motivation back, I'm feeling stronger than I did in my 20s, and it made me a much better husband to my wife.
I'm Eric Ramos, healthcare provider at Revive Men's Health. If you are always feeling tired or moody, have a difficult time sleeping, or decreased libido, you may be suffering from low testosterone.
Book your free T-check and exam at Revive Men's Health, Salt Lake City. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy 2. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
Mom, meet Sarah.
From first time Nana moments.
Yeah, welcome to Flight 101.
To annual girls trip moments. Your can't miss moments are worth protecting against RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV. And there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com.
So where should we go next?
Sponsored by Pfizer.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Tim and Amanda.
One of the big differences, I think, between reading a story online and hearing it from us, Tim, is that, you and I are allowed to share a reaction. We need to be able to say, what in the world were they thinking? So that people listening will know. We feel it too. When we read a story that sounds ridiculous, we're right with you. It sounds ridiculous.
Well, we get caught up, I'm sure just like our listeners do sometimes, in death scrolling on social media. And fact-checking it on your own is tough. The great thing about tuning in every morning and starting your morning with us on KSL is you can count on the fact that when that information comes out of the radio in your direction, it comes from reliable sources.
It's already been fact-checked.
Right. And that's not always easy when you're getting it online. Finding who wrote it, when was it written, has it been updated with the current facts of the day that change sometimes minute to minute, not just day to day.
Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9 on KSL News Radio.
Do you worry about how much someone drinks?
Do you feel angry or depressed most of the time? Do you feel neglected or unloved?
Do you feel you attract people who tend to be compulsive or abusive?
Do you have money problems because of someone else's drinking?
Are you afraid or embarrassed to bring your friends home?
Do you feel that if the drinker loved you, she or he would stop drinking?
If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are not alone.
More than half of all adults have a family history of alcoholism.
Not everyone trapped by alcohol is an alcoholic.
Families and friends are suffering too. Al-Anon and Alateen can help. Call 1-866-200-0223 or visit alanon.org/help.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. Don't miss Cold's new Season 3, where I look into the unsolved disappearance of Cherie Warren, a woman last seen leaving her job at a Salt Lake City office in 1985. Police cast suspicion on Cherie's estranged husband and boyfriend, but never made any arrests or recovered Cherie's remains. Find Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Email from school about the incident today.
Scary.
You know, teachers like me, parents, we don't always know as much as you guys do about what's going on with other kids.
Half the time, it's rumors.
Yeah, but if you're ever concerned about a friend who's having trouble with alcohol, prescription drugs, anything, you need to tell an adult, someone you know and trust. That can be hard, but speaking up about a problem is what helping a friend is all about.
For more information, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, the last out last night marked the end of an era for the Salt Lake Bees at Smith's Ballpark. Second, the man suspected of plotting an assassination attempt against former President Trump will not be getting out of jail. And third, the state of California says ExxonMobil knew most plastic isn't being recycled, but it's still promoting recycling. 77 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. In this presidential election cycle, undecided voters and their pieces are something we're going to get to when we get to 2:35 today. We're going to talk about the change factor in this particular segment and how change is hard and scary for a lot of us. And sometimes seeing different communities, we devolve into caricatures and all of the uncertainty, and often that leads us to bad places and spaces like contempt. And so we have to do it a little bit different. Well, there's an organization that is doing just that and focusing on young people to make it happen. To me, this is a beautiful conversation about thinking again about what we think we know about people we don't know. And there was a fantastic piece in Deseret.com today by Maria Manzos talking about how teens are uniting America one hometown at a time. And we're really thrilled to have join us on the program today David McCullough, co-founder and CEO of the American Exchange Project. And David, welcome to the program.
Hey, Boyd, how are you? Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are doing great, and I love what you are doing. And I want you to describe it for our listeners, because I think we need to do this not just with young people around the country. We need to do this with everybody around the country.
I couldn't agree more, and thank you for saying that. Maybe say it louder. I'm just kidding. So we are a new nonprofit. It's called the American Exchange Project, and in short, we run a study abroad program. But rather than sending high school students to study abroad in another country, we send them to another town in America that is politically, socioeconomically, and culturally very different from the one that they're growing up in. So This year, we've had kids from West Jordan and American Fork travel to places like Palo Alto, California, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and vice versa. And the whole idea is to get to know a hometown that's very different from your own, maybe even immerse yourself in a bubble that's a little different from the bubble you grew up in, and become friends with people from different walks of life, different races, ethnicities, political backgrounds, socioeconomic classes. And the hope is that if we can do that at a large enough scale, it might help bring together a country that is dividing against itself and forgetting what civil discourse looks like.
Yeah, I love that. And I am one of those who firmly believes we're not nearly as divided as we think we are, or as many in the political class want us to believe we are. And I love that you're doing this with young people in particular, because once they have that connection, then the next time they see a caricature of someone from a red state or a blue state, or from a wealthy part of the country or a rural part of the country, they're going to stop and pause and say, wait a minute, that was not my experience. What they're serving up there. And to me, that's all the difference.
Well, we can never forget that there's great profit to be made in turning people against each other. It's a long trend of human tactic to tribalize against the other. We should unite because we are not those guys, and we need to go get those guys. We need to be against them. But another great motivating factor in humanity is the aspiration toward progress and the collective, the larger whole, the formation of a more perfect union, which is a familiar line to all us Americans. And the reality for most young people is that, it's not that they necessarily have negative caricatures of people who are different from them so much as they don't know it all. We sent a young boy from the Bronx to a fishing village in the northern part of Massachusetts, town called Gloucester, Mass. And when I met him there, and he'd immigrated from Africa as an early teen, I said, what do you think? What do you think of Gloucester? He said, well, it's amazing. I said, oh, really? Why is that? He said, well, there are people here. I said, what do you mean? He said, I thought the world was kind of New York and Connecticut and the rest was just trees. And I thought, you think of that like New Yorker cover, the world according to a New Yorker, and it's the city and there's a little Eiffel Tower on the other side of the globe, and that's really it. Well, we all kind of live that way. We all kind of have that view of the world, and we're all in our own ways, in a way that we don't ever mean to be mean or egocentric, but we all can be a little self-centered, a little cloistered in our corners. And if you allow a young person's first impression of the other, right? If that boy's first impression of fishermen or people from Massachusetts was something negative, a caricature they saw on the news or on social media, an impression that they, or a point or a viewpoint they heard from that wacky uncle at the Thanksgiving dinner table, then you're setting yourself behind and you're setting yourself up for failure. In other words, they're going to get the first impression somewhere. But if that first impression is one that is not just sympathetic, but authentic, but real, then you're in essence educating young people. And I think what you're ultimately doing is you're blunting the edge of prejudice. Yes. You're making it much harder for them to not necessarily agree with them on everything, but hate them or say derogatory things about their character, not just debate the point they might have.
Yeah, this is such a crucial thing. This is something we try to do every day, is to just get people to think again about what they think they know and think again about who they know. I love the way you go about this. And I have to tell you, I had an interesting moment this morning. I was writing a column this morning and included an experience that I had with your grandfather, historian David McCullough. And I was a chief of staff in the Senate, and we had a conversation in the Library of Congress, and just talked about how history is not about dates and locations and events, but an unending and inexhaustible river of principles and ideas to explore. And you've done that in an amazing way. This is a family legacy that I love. And part of your origin story, David, was your own experience getting out of your own bubble and recognizing that this great American dream that you were part of wasn't necessarily getting to some of your peers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My grandfather was motivated by a lot of things, but one of them was to evoke the American identity and the American story through forgotten people from the past. And growing up, I had the same interest and still do, but more for folks, for the living, people who are around today. And so in the summer after my junior year of college, I borrowed my mom's Mazda CX-9, our family's kid hauler, and hit the road. I drove 7,100 miles across the country, and my aim was to research the effects of poverty on education in some of our nation's poorest communities. But rather than talking to professors or experts or big think kind of folks, I wanted to talk to folks in the middle of it, which was a tried and true tradition in American intellectual thought, going out, hitting the road, and talking to the folk. And in doing that in the summer of 2016, while the Trump and Clinton campaigns were also making their way around the country, I had what was not just the most profound educational experience of my life, but a deeply transformational experience that's absolutely set me on the course to where I am now. And I made some good friends, which was part of the fun too.
I love that. That is such a powerful thing. The project is called the American Exchange Project. It's giving teenagers across the country the opportunity to go somewhere that isn't like what they're used to, get them out of the bubble, learn to understand and live with and be around people who look different, think different, believe different, worship different. And that is the beginning of better days for our nation. Again, David McCullough is the co-founder and CEO of the American Exchange Project. You need to check that out. This is the kind of exchange, more than we need foreign exchange students, we need American exchange students. David, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to having you back because I want to continue this conversation. There's a lot left to go and a lot of lives to impact along the way. Thanks for joining us today.
Deal. Thanks for having me. Talk again soon.
All right. That's David McCullough, co-founder and CEO of the American Exchange Project. This is awesome. You can check out Maria Manzo's piece on the American Exchange Project at Deseret.com today. Get out of your bubble. Get your young people in particular into places that are a little uncomfortable. It'll make for a better future. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. The Utah Hockey Club was on the ice at the Olympic Oval in Kearns ahead of their first preseason home game tonight. KSL News Radio's Eric Cabrera was there.
If you haven't been inside the Olympic Oval in Kearns, there's a running track inside. And in the center is ice with 2 rink setups. The team, half in the black jerseys and the other in white, gathered on the South Sheet ice rink to run practice drills and get warmed up for the first game on home soil tonight. Also, shout out to Michael Carcone for scoring the first goal in preseason history for the club and 2 total for the game on the road.
The club is back from their 5-3 win against the St. Louis Blues. In our top national story this hour, the United States is sending additional troops to the Middle East now, as Israel says it has carried another attack out against Hezbollah, this time in Beirut. Israel now warning residents from near the border to move now and clear out of the region, saying more strikes are coming. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up on the day, 61 points right now, while the NASDAQ is up 25. The S&P 500 closing up on the day, 16 points. And our KSL weather looks like sunshine, a little bit warmer. And that's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
We hope you have the right app on your phone for news. You probably have dozens.
But the KSL News Radio app, well, it makes our live stream super easy.
Plus, our talk shows are right there as podcast for your workday.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Did you know 96% of Americans lose an average of $111,000 in Social Security income? And it's because they claim their benefits at the wrong time. Don't lose $111,000 in Social Security income that's rightfully yours. Learn how you could wring every nickel out of your benefits on Retirement Solutions Radio this Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, right here on KSL, News Radio 1027.
The Management Minute is a service of the MBA program in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. I'm Professor Scott Hammond. Heads up, the parents called to their Little League player who was counting daisies in the outfield. Heads up, the coach called to his players, hoping that they would see and respond to what was about to happen in the game. When we say heads up, we're saying pay attention to the details of your job. But we're also saying pay attention to what's happening in the game. All of us are charged with doing micro details, but also seeing the bigger picture and reacting to macro surprises and helping others. If you do just the details, heads up. If you see just the big picture, heads up too. Learn more about framing your work in an MBA program from Utah State University. Go to utahstatemba.com. That's utahstatemba.com. I'm Scott Hammond. Hope to see you in one of our classes.
Hey, pet parents! With Progressive's collision coverage, you get extra protection for your cat or dog, because there's nothing worse than seeing your pet hurt. Like when you see their face after accidentally stepping on their tail, and you say, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Pickles." But as you kiss his nose and rub his little belly welly, you know Mr. Pickles is thinking, "You betrayed me." Anywho, Progressive pays up to $1,000 in vet bills if your pet is injured in an auto accident. Learn more at progressive.com and watch where you step. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Collision coverage subject to policy terms. Not available in all states.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I have a serious heart condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or HCM. Some symptoms include being short of breath, feeling tired, or having dizziness or chest pain. I still had symptoms on my beta blocker, so I asked my cardiologist about any treatment advances. It was a breakthrough for me. That's why I'm working with Bristol Myers Squibb to raise awareness about HCM and to help others like me. Talk to your cardiologist today and visit hcmrealtalk.com for more information.
Sponsored by Bristol Myers Squibb.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
A four-vehicle crash with injuries in Riverton has traffic tied up at the intersection of southbound Bangalore Highway and 134th South. It might be a spot you just want to avoid since there's already road work in the area. And Salt Lake City PD wrapping up an accident at 1700 South, 1300 East. Murdoch Hyundai is celebrating 3 brand new dealerships with 1.99% for 5 years on the Tucson or Elantra. Murdoch Hyundai in Logan, Linden, and Murray. MurdochHyundai.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Mostly sunny skies with a high around 80 today, up to 90 by Wednesday. 77 degrees and partly cloudy right now. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
In every presidential election cycle, particularly this election cycle, undecided voters are going to play a big part in determining who moves into the Oval Office, as well as what happens up and down the ballot in our election season 2024. But I want to get us a little bit different angle today. I want us to think again about what we think we know when it comes to undecided voters. Sometimes they get a bad rap. Sometimes it's like, oh, they're just disconnected or they're lazy, or how in the world can they not know who they're going to vote for at this stage of the game? And so we want to get underneath the headline and think again about what we think we know. We're really thrilled to have Gall Beckerman, a staff writer at The Atlantic, is also the author most recently of The Quiet Before on the unexpected origins of radical ideas. Love that. And has a great piece in The Atlantic called Let Us Now Praise Undecided Voters, which is exactly what I think we want to do. And Gall, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
So as we dive into this, one, your piece in The Atlantic is awesome. People need to check that out at theatlantic.com and kind of walk us through your exploration into this wonderful world of the undecided voter.
Of course. Well, so I came to this topic with the same thoughts that I think a lot of people have about undecided voters, which is that these must be, people who are really not paying attention. And then I started reading the way that they were actually talking about the election and all the different articles that have appeared lately about undecided voters. And it occurred to me that these weren't actually uninformed people. They were speaking with quite a bit of knowledge, or as much knowledge as any of us have, about the different issues that matter to them, about the two candidates. And listening very closely, I suddenly realized, they're actually, maybe many of these people are just indecisive people. The people who, we know from other parts of our lives, who can't commit to a partner, or, who go down some kind of internet rabbit hole every time they need to buy something for their home. They just have a hard time deciding.
Yeah. And you also pointed out in your piece, one thing that I think is really interesting that I think we might need a little more of for everybody else. And you talk about it in the context of that group of people that we often refer to as the maximizers. So explain that for us, for those who aren't familiar with the term maximizer, but then let's apply it to this presidential election cycle.
So a maximizer is somebody who is searching for the perfect and not content with the good enough, right? And we sort of know this from other parts of our lives. It is that person who's needs to get a new couch or a car, let's say, and just cannot pull the trigger. Will just kind of search endlessly and gather more and more information. So in the context of indecisive voters, this makes a lot of sense for a certain type of person. They are unlike most of us sort of making the decision on which presidential candidate to support based on or one big sort of factor that we're taking into consideration. They just start accumulating more and more information. They want to know exactly, what is, Kamala Harris's plan for lowering inflation? What exactly does Trump think about, gun control? And this accumulation of sort of information actually becomes a kind of stalling mechanism for them.
Yeah, and so as they go down that path, and I think for a lot of us, you look at them and say, really, there's only two choices in this one. But as you said, they start to accumulate all of the different scenarios and possibilities. But I think that's also instructive because a vote is always a series of trade-offs. And it's a chance for us to prioritize our priorities in terms of, well, I think this issue is more important than that, or this policy is more important than that. But it's also an opportunity to express something. And I think some of these undecided want to make sure they're expressing the right thing, but that may be leading them down some of those delay tactics.
Yeah, there is the way you put it was very, very well said, and it kind of points to one of the conclusions I came to while working on this piece was, the undecided voter is in many ways the ideal voter because it's somebody who is actually taking very seriously how much their vote counts. They're not taking for granted that they belong to one tribe or another who has to vote in a particular way. They actually want to really understand how these various issues relate to their lives. And so, I sort of concluded with a feeling of, let's not just disparage these people. Let's actually think about whether or not there's certain aspects of their deliberation, which makes us feel a little bit crazy at the moment, the closer we get to November, that is praiseworthy. Now, you could say that this particular election, a lot of people feel like this in America, is almost nearly, existential. A lot of both candidates are saying this, right? And so all of this sort of hair splitting that that the undecideds are engaged in feels sort of irrelevant. And that's a valid point of view. It's, happens to be sort of my point of view. But I still think that there is something that would be lost if we didn't have these sort of undecided voters. And, the trend line points towards fewer and fewer of them every election cycle.
Yeah, and I loved how you pointed that out in your piece, Gull, that they are becoming very rare, these undecided voters, which is really sad to me because it means everyone else is just kind of set and checking it based on long-held things or what they think they know about the other side. Which is a lot of the cause for the division we experience in the country. But the thing about these undecideds to me that I thought you pointed out so powerfully is that they remain curious and they continue to explore possibilities. And I actually think that's a good thing.
Yeah, one of the social scientists I talked to put it this way. He said that they have intellectual humility. Which means that you sort of know what you don't know, and you have to seek out answers. Now, to just kind of add a little bit of nuance to this, there were people who understood the deliberating of these indecisive people as being sort of a little bit narrow in the sense that they're thinking. A lot of them are thinking about what's good for me, what's good for my family, what will turn my business around. And that might, that doesn't sound like a citizen. That sounds like a consumer to me, and something that I guess I personally would want people to turn, kind of thinking I'd want people to turn away from in an election, where you are sort of thinking about what's best for the country. But I think generally the attitude of questioning, not taking things for granted, sort of informing yourself, really looking at all the various issues. We have to see that as a good thing.
Yeah, no question about it. And I love the intellectual humility. I think that's a a crucial virtue and skill that we've got to re-enthrone in our society. And even if that leads us to places and spaces that we're not really comfortable in, like the idea of writing in a name or voting for a third party. We get served up the obvious. It's an either or. It's a binary choice. It's this or that, which is all part of the fake fights and false choices we regularly get served up by politicians. But I love this idea of someone who is undecided, who may in the end say, after I've weighed everything and explored everything, both these candidates came up lacking, and so I'm going to choose different. And even though people will tell me I'm throwing my vote away, I am making an expression. I am sending a message by what I do. And again, I think that might be part of a better solution as well.
Yeah, and if you consider also just how partisan our country has become in its thinking, it actually struck me, as a little bit brave even to sort of say I'm not going to go with the tribe, that I am supposed to go with, that all my friends are going with, that my family's going with, that I'm actually going to sort of pose the question to myself, what do I really think? And a lot of the interviews that I've read and heard with undecided voters, they're going through that kind of process. It's like some of them they've always been Republican. They're, their families, they're going back, 2 generations have been Republicans. That's how they've always voted. But, they have an issue with the current, Republican candidate for president, whatever, something, it might be a kind of a visceral reaction or a substantive one that they're, having to wrestle with what does it mean to step away from the tribe that I've always belonged to and vote differently, which is sort of a fascinating process and one that we don't, do a lot in our daily lives. We don't often kind of question those basic assumptions about, the things we take for granted.
Yeah, this is a fabulous conversation, and it's a beautiful piece. Gall Beckerman, staff writer at The Atlantic, author of The Quiet Before on the Unexpected Origins of Radical Ideas. I think this is a radical idea around celebrating those blessed, wonderful, undecided voters who, as Gall instructed us, have that intellectual humility and might even have the courage to be heroic and do something different. And maybe that'll inspire the rest of us as well. Gall, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right. We'll step aside for a quick break. That was a great stuff from Gall Beckerman. Check out that piece at theatlantic.com. We look forward to having Gall back to continue the conversation. Who would have thought that perhaps those undecided voters are actually really engaged, radically curious, intellectually have humility, and may even lead us to a better place? Something to think about. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Kendon Holdaway, and I work for the National Kidney Foundation of Utah and Idaho. Before that, I worked as a dialysis technician at the largest dialysis center in Utah. And before that, I was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease at age 14. However, I am one of the lucky ones. I have an amazing mother who gave me a second chance. She donated her kidney to me, and it changed my life. Thanks to her and a scholarship from the Kidney Foundation, I was able to graduate college, get married, and apply to medical school in hopes of becoming a doctor. Sadly, there are many who are not as lucky as I am. Every car you donate to towcars.org gives hope and help to 3,000 patients like me, many of whom are still waiting for their miracle. Towing is free and donations are tax deductible. Keep donations local by donating online at towkars.org. That's towcars with a K, like kidney.
Lowe's knows it's easier to make the right calls when you have the right team. That's why our Lowe's Red Vest associates can help with game time decisions. Plus, use in-store mode on the Lowe's app to find what you need. Under pressure at home and want it soon? Order online by 2 p.m. to get it same day. Same day valid on eligible in-stock items and select zip codes only. Subject to driver availability. Fees vary based on purchase. Exclusions and more terms apply. See Lowe's.com/same-day delivery for details.
Tommy! I can't wait for golf this weekend, huh, buddy? Time flies. Love you, man. Oh,
don't forget your knee brace again. We aren't in college anymore.
Moments together matter, so help protect yourself from RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV, and there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Nearly 70% of Utah's land is controlled by the federal government, severely limiting Utah's ability to actively manage and protect our natural resources. Our families, businesses, and communities know there's a better way. Utahns have been good stewards of our public lands for generations. That's why we're asking each and every Utahn to get informed, speak up, and learn more at standforourland.utah.gov.
When it comes to our homes, stains in your carpet can be really frustrating. It can be easy to think you need harsh chemicals or detergents to get them out, but these always leave behind soapy residue, which ends up attracting more dirt to the area. That's why you should trust Zero-Res to get out tough stains and regularly clean your surfaces. Zero-Res uses ZR water to deeply clean carpets without any icky residue. Right now, mention KSL and get 3 rooms of carpet cleaning for just $109. Plus 20% off air duct cleaning. Book now at zerores.com.
Sometimes the hardest thing is the first step to any journey. Going to sotaweightloss.com today, SOTA weightloss.com, and clicking on that button that says request a nutritionist callback. I worked with a nutritionist and still am. I mean, I've been in maintenance for 2.5 years. I lost 34 pounds, but you'll talk to somebody like Shawnee.
I love working here at Soda Weight Loss because I get to see every individual that I work with's lives change on a day-to-day basis. They go from not being able to play with their grandkids to playing with them, walking with them, getting off medications they've been on for decades, and it just makes everything fulfilling in life.
Everybody's looking for the quick fix, and some people out there are going for pills or they're going for injections. The bad news on the backside of that is you usually end up gaining that weight back plus some. Soda will make a difference. They'll help you keep that weight off. Find out how they can help you or somebody in your family. Just go to sotaweightloss.com, spelled SOTA, and it stands for State of the Art.
Our home's been due for a little TLC for a while now.
So when we heard Cypress Credit Union was offering a home equity line of credit at just 6.49% APR for the first 6 months, you better believe we jumped on it.
It's just what we've needed to renovate the living room.
And the kitchen.
And definitely the man cave.
For a limited time, get a HELOC at 6.49% APR. Learn more at cypresscu.com. Cypress Credit Union. Your future is our future. Federally insured by NCUA. Equal housing lender. NMLS number 666254.
Get deeper insights on the news from inside sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. Really interesting. An update was given over the weekend regarding the extensive and expansive restoration and retrofitting project on the iconic Salt Lake Temple of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The years-long renovation has brought attention to the importance of sacred, historic buildings and the spaces they occupy in our communities and in culture. Such buildings were built with sacrifice, much more than being built with the very primitive construction tools they had at the time, and they were fashioned and fortified with a lot more faith than they were just stones and timber. So with the reports of progress and details of what has changed, along with what will remain the same inside the Salt Lake Temple, the off-sighted and often near-sighted cynics and critics and skeptics have weighed in from all the far corners of social media. Those who seem to know better what is best for sacred spaces would do well to take the long view of the true essence of such sacred structures. In fact, I would suggest a trip to the Grand Shrine of Ise, a sacred place and a space that draws millions of visitors each year. It's located in the Mie Prefecture of Japan. It's a great place to gain some perspective, a different perspective. So understand this. In a tradition that dates back over 1,300 years, this Shinto shrine is completely destroyed and demolished every 20 years and then entirely rebuilt. Author Jenny Lau wrote of the awe and wonder that she felt during her visit to the sacred Ise shrine. She said the 20-year renewal process, also known as Shikinen Sengyu, it's this Tokawaka, or everlasting youth is what it's described as. It's what you believe, this idea that repeated rebuilding renders sanctuaries eternal. So Lau continued, positing a compelling conundrum for those who question the sanity of such rebuilding and the experts who wring their hands over what's being done, undone, or redone. She said, "It is for you, the individual, to decide what is sacred. Is it the building itself or the journey?" It's also worth exploring the possibility that what is truly historic is not what's in the building, but rather what is transformed within the individual who chooses to enter the building. Now, you all know that I love history and historic places and artifacts, especially those infused with great meaning. Historian David McCullough once told me about his perception of history, how that changed when history was no longer a collection of facts and dates, but it became an inexhaustible river of ideas to be explored. I love that, because truly what matters most about historic places is the principles found in such spaces and what they inspire us to remember or become. The difference between an old building and a building that's historic is what happened on the inside. Winston Churchill famously said, "We shape our buildings, and afterwards, our buildings shape us." Now, I've used that quote many times over the years, and it wasn't until not too long ago I came to fully understand the context of that statement. This wasn't just one more quotable quip from the prolific Winston Churchill. It was notable because he was referring to the rebuilding of the House of Commons that had just been bombed and had been bombed regularly as a high-profile target during World War II. So I want you to listen to this full quote from Winston Churchill. He said, "On the night of May 10th, 1941, one of the last bombs of the last serious raid, our House of Commons was destroyed by the violence of the enemy. And we have now to consider whether we should build it up again, and how and when. We shape our buildings, and afterwards our buildings shape us. Having dwelt and served for more than 40 years in the late chamber, the House of Commons, and having derived very great pleasure and advantage therefrom, I naturally should like to see it restored in all essential to its old form, convenience, and dignity." So Churchill understood the power of preserving and restoring a building that was really the people's house. He knew the rubble represented much more than steel and concrete. The building was simply the vessel that held the echoes of critical debates, the vision of freedom, hope for the future, and the very soul of the nation. Such buildings and places and spaces are just that. They're just vessels for such moments, for such movements, and for such transformation to actually happen. So the announcement regarding the ongoing efforts to preserve and improve the Salt Lake Temple is likewise more than just an effort to ensure stone and steel, glass and grounds can be used for another 125 years. The building in the heart of downtown Salt Lake City and the peaceful grounds that surround it are actually part of centuries of human building and rebuilding and restoration projects to create sacred space. So this pioneer-era temple and the various restorations and improvements it's gone under from the 1890s to 2024 is about sacred spaces and holy places where followers of Jesus Christ and people of every other faith and even of no faith can come and feel peace, experience hope, and perhaps catch a vision of eternity for all God's children. So, quibbling over whether or not a certain room or molding or hallway or staircase, ceiling, mural, or floor should be removed, replaced, or restored is interesting and has its historical place, to be sure. The ensuing debate then shifts, of course, to decisions about to which era should something be restored. Should it be restored to the 1900s, the 1800s, or in the case of the Shinto shrine, an era that was 1,300 years ago? It's true, no earthly material is eternal, and we'd be wise to recognize the long view of our structures and spaces and see them through the lens of why they're sacred and what is the essence of that sacredness. I think that's an important conversation to get to. Now, the new House of Commons was not exactly where Churchill delivered speeches that saved the country and fueled the flame of freedom. The essence was that in the House of Commons, Churchill gave voice to principles that preserved and transformed the world. The Issei Shrine has come and gone every 20 years for 1,300 years. It matters little that it disappears for a season of rebuilding and rebirth. The essence is that the rebuilding renders it eternal. So the Salt Lake Temple's renewal and retrofit is likewise filled with challenges, opportunities, and choices. But the essence is that the structure is merely a vessel for the transformation within the lives of those who enter. So perhaps we all would be a little bit more wise to follow the wisdom of those who have led and who are leading the efforts of the Issei Shrine, the House of Commons, and the Salt Lake Temple. There's a transformational power in that process and results that repeated rebuilding renders. So in a building and in a human, not everything can or should be saved or salvaged. Understanding what is interesting, what is important, what is essential ensures that what is sacred and what is transformational is preserved, strengthened, and extended forever. That's something to think about. You can find that piece at Deseret.com today. And that wraps it up for us on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. I am Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us today. And as always, as you go out into the world, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Good afternoon, 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Jeff Catlin. 77 degrees in Salt Lake City, KSL's top